Started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today at this end of summer, beginning of fall transitional time. I always think about it as back to school time, and maybe you do too. And so we are so grateful that you have chosen to join us today to get some additional learning hours in and sharpen your skill set and your confidence. My name is Allison Weiss, and I'm the Associate Director of Corporate and Executive Education at the Brown School of Professional Studies. The mission and the vision of the Brown School of Professional Studies is to give you, professional learners, the tools, skills, and networks that you need to transform the way the world works for good. And it is a mission that inspires me every day because the data shows that the way the world works now, unfortunately, does not work for the majority of people. According to a Gallup survey that was done just in November 2023, and they tend to update this almost annually, 70% of the US workforce reports being disengaged at work. And that is a huge percentage when you think of the fact that many of us are spending over 50% of our waking hours at work. Low engagement has been shown to create low productivity, creativity, and innovation, but also really bad mental and emotional health outcomes because of how much time we're spending at work. And so this is something that is a really big problem on both a societal level, a personal level, and an organizational level. In addition, that same Gallup survey found that 44% of global workers and 52% of US employees reported that they experienced stress just the previous day alone. And what they found was that managers play an outsized role in the stress workers feel on the job, which influences their daily stress overall. And I know that that quote at first looks really scary and really negative, but actually I'm inspired by this quote because if we as managers and we as professionals who show up and manage projects and people and culture, if we have an outsized influence, we can also have an outsized positive influence, which means that each of you, just by showing up today and by choosing the School of Professional Studies as your learning partner, are already taking the first step to become the champions that we need to transform the way the world works for good so that it works for everyone. So thank you for being here. And I hope that you continue to see the Brown School of Professional Studies as your lifelong learning partner. We offer 33 professional and early career master's programs if you are looking to take on a full learning journey. In addition, we offer 30 plus non-credit programs on in-demand topics, which we'll talk about more in just one more slide, and in a variety of formats to fit into your busy schedule. And then lastly, we also can create custom solutions for you at your organization. So if you and your team would like us to join you or to come onto our campus and to have us deliver a program that meets your needs, we would love to talk to you about that further. One thing that makes Brown's programs really unique is that everything is based on research, and you'll hear that a little bit even today in this free masterclass today. And we offer programs that are based on 3 different topic areas. And I won't go into detail on each of these, but just to give you an overview of the types of programming you can expect from the Brown School of Professional Studies, we offer programs in leadership, health, data and technology, and all the intersections of those 3. And in particular, right now, we have openings available in our Applied DEI Strategies certificate, our Leader as Coach program, our Effective Communication program, and our Executive program in General Management. And that is the one program I am going to tell you a little bit more about because the executive program for general managers is based off of these 12 skills methodology that Ed is going to lead us through one of today and also give us a little bit of an overview of the methodology. If you are a senior leader or you are someone who's been identified as the next generation of senior leaders and you're looking to prepare for that leadership move, we would love for you to join us in this brand new certificate, which is launching October 22nd. This is a 3-course certificate that builds on itself, that also includes a residential week here at Brown that will give you the individual leadership skills that you need to succeed and to deliver results in course 1, give you the organizational leadership skills that you need to influence strategy and culture in course 2, and give you this technology and culture context in being able to plan how to lead the future of work in course 3. So by the end of this program, you'll know how to lead yourself, lead organizations, and lead us into the future. So we really hope that you choose to join us. And lastly, we will be asking you to influence the future of our programs. We're constantly growing, constantly changing. And so at the end of the session, we'll have some poll questions for you, asking us what you'd like to see in the future of our programs. If you have a question at any point today, please don't hesitate. Please don't wait till the end. Please click on the bottom bar of Zoom, click on Q&A, and type and submit your questions there. I'll be monitoring them throughout, and I'll answer any questions via text that I can, or I'll send them to Ed at the end when we're doing Q&A. And so with that, I am delighted to introduce and turn things over to our speaker today, Ed Barros. Ed is a professor of the practice in leadership here at Brown and actually just celebrated his first anniversary with Brown.
Right.
Congratulations, Ed. I saw that on LinkedIn. Time flies.
Yes.
But he has been working with leaders at all levels in the areas of strategy, strategic leadership, and leadership development for the past 25 years. He is an International Coaching Federation certified coach and a member of Harvard's Institute of Coaching. And prior to that, he held a number of leadership roles at different organizations, including the Duke Corporate Education, Deloitte, General Electric, PwC, and the Palladium Group. So he has this really wealth of experience in both the teaching side and the practical side. And I think you'll really see that today. And he's the author of the 12 Skills book, the co-author along with Laura Downing, and will be leading us through that today. Welcome, Ed. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Allison. I appreciate it. Hey, everybody. Good to see you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Let me go ahead and put my slides up. I'm hoping you can see that. Allison, keep me honest.
Yes.
All right. So we've got a good number of folks here on the call today. So we've got some repeat offenders that have been here in the past. So for them, great to see you again. For the folks that are new, it's great to see you for the first time. And as Allison pointed out, we have a number of programs here at SPS that I think you'll find useful. In fact, Allison and I are working diligently on the program that she highlighted all the time. So we're excited. If you enjoy this content or any of the content that we've done on the 12 skills methodology, by all means, you may enjoy the certificate that you can get from it. It's a lot deeper dive on some of the things we're going into over the course of our lessons in leadership. But let's get into the content today and give you a quick welcome. We'll talk about lessons in leadership briefly. We'll give you a 12 skills refresher for most of you. I think this will probably just be indeed a refresher for a couple of folks who'll be new. But the bulk of today, we want to spend talking about group collaboration. It's one of those things that I think seems almost benign as a topic because it's done so frequently in organizations today. Unfortunately, it's not always done well. And I think that's what we want to talk about today is how do we almost revisit what it means to effectively collaborate given the volume of it today. So our lessons in leadership and the particular one on core leadership skills that we're talking about here is part of a broader series called Lessons in Leadership that you can find on Brown SPS's website. We have all kind of content available for you. There's articles that we put together, there's videos, there's recordings as people are talking about. So please join the conversation and partake of the things that will improve your effectiveness in the workplace. So the 12 skills approach that Laura Downing and I put together is really based off of this simple model, which starts with a good self-assessment. We have one on the 12 skills website. It's free. At some point, we'll get it done and get it back to you. I know a number of people have done it, and we'll get back to you on that. But ultimately, there's these 6 areas that are tensions that we think, based on our, I would say, primarily secondary research, really are the things that give leaders about 70 to 80% of the skills they need on that kind of leadership skill side. So you'll see strategy is paired with results. You'll see that when we talk about driving teams, we're also thinking through talent. And if we want to drive change, we have to communicate. And so within each of these 6 areas, there's the 12 individual skills. So today we're talking about collaboration. It's one of the skills in the teams area, as you can see. So let's jump into that and think, why are we spending time on this? Why is this topic important? Well, again, if you are interested in downloading any of the workbooks for free or doing the assessment, you can just go to the 12 Skills site and you can see the address there. All that stuff is available to you for free. So why collaboration? Why would this make the cut in the 12 skills? And I'll have some questions and some participation activities for you. So markets are changing. We know they're moving quickly, and it's hard given the volume of information out there, the number of variables for any one individual or small team to really have the perspective to understand what they are, what direction they're moving in, what the velocity is, and how to fit them together in a sort of comprehensive, sense-making kind of way. So, well, collaboration enables us to work not just across, but beyond the boundaries of our organization. And given the technology that we have today, collaboration should be more, I would say, plentiful and easier to engage in than ever before. And by and large, that's true, but that brings some challenges too. We want to engage the workforce as we're changing the workforce. I did a post this week in our LinkedIn group on 12 skills about the impact of AI on middle manager jobs. That was just a repost of some McKinsey thinking on that podcast. But ultimately, we want to have the workforce participating in the decisions that we're making as an organization. So collaborating enables us to reach not just across, but down into the organization. We want to engage people individually, put them in a position to have a voice. As Allison talked about, we spend a lot of time at work, but we don't, as leaders, always do a great job managing people or integrating people or putting them in a position where they feel like they're making a valuable contribution. So we want to make sure we do that to the extent we can. And at an organizational level, we are moving so quickly today that we need to identify better solutions faster than ever before. And what you see on the right-hand side are just some books I put in there. I'm not recommending these per se, but I will say that Morten Hansen's work, Rob Cross's work, is some of the things that we feature because it's been highly effective. And there's two ways we're going to think about collaborating today. We're going to talk about a very simple way to think about improving your collaborations. I think you're going to be, I don't mean to denigrate the work that Laura and I have done, but I think you're going to be a little underwhelmed at first. But it really relies on doing some of the basics well. And I think because we collaborate so much, going to Rob Cross's work, because there's this sense of collaboration overload, we oftentimes forget some of the basic things we need to do to collaborate effectively. And then there's different tools that we have, like visual collaboration, technology collaboration, platforms like Mural that make things easier today than they've ever been before. But collaboration is not only here today, it's proliferating. And it's not just within our organizations, it's across boundaries and geographies. So we have to really think about what is it as leaders we need to do a better job and be more effective. So what we want to talk about today, and by the time we're done, we want to spend some time thinking about, when do you need to collaborate? When is it time for you to actually structure and put together a collaboration? And that's important, thinking about how to develop it. So we'll draw on some team concepts that will be a bit of a refresher for you. How do we make sure we get the right group of people together? So again, in our team discussion that we had previously, you can go back and find the video of the recording of the webinar if you want. We talked about the kind of roles that people play that might be useful to revisit. We're going to talk about your role if you're guiding the project in terms of reaching your outcomes, but also managing conflict along the way and some of the things that you can do to help, I would say, facilitate effective communication. And then ultimately, whatever your collaboration is, and I'll share some stories from a teach that I did recently with a large transportation company in the Midwest. I spend about a half day talking about collaboration with them. This idea of you've got to be able to measure what your progress is toward the goal that you have for your collaboration. And sometimes that's even murky for collaborations. I bet some of you are working on projects or larger collaborations that the goal or goals is still not entirely clear. That's not a place where we want to be, and that's not something that's going to generate success for us. So we want to think about how to alter that. Now, as typically the case, we're going to do a quick quiz at the outset, collaboration self-assessment. So I want you to do an honest assessment, and then I'll ask you to put in the chat, how do you think you do at collaborating? So we've got these 3 dimensions that we'll go through for our 3P process. When you think about a collaboration that you're working on or you're going to be working on, do you have a diverse group of creative thinkers that generally are results oriented? Do you have a process that's structured that guides the activities and make sure that people not only get work done, but we reward their efforts? And do you have broad-based participation that really drives towards the goals you have for the particular collaboration? So give yourself a score there on a scale of 0 to 9. I'd be interested to see. Go ahead and put it in the chat so we can take a look. And again, the point of this is just so you can get a sense of how you're doing. So people are putting up 6, 7, 6, 5. Okay, I appreciate the candor. 6 or 7, so 2 to 3. Yep, that's fine. That's why you're here. If you've got a 4, if you're not doing the kind of job that you want to do, then by all means, think about as we go through the 3 different areas. So I really appreciate that. I appreciate your honesty. Because I think where we are today will give you a sense of, what are some specific things you can do. And again, I'll make the offer at the end. If you have any questions, just send me an email. I'm happy to have a conversation with you. Kanika, well done. So we want to think about collaboration broadly at first, and then we want to narrow in on some of the particulars. So what is collaboration? Well, we're going to talk about collaborative leadership, and you see over on the left-hand panel, collaboration brings in a lot of different elements that are probably very familiar to us. There's an aspect of project management to it, right? There's this notion of teamwork. We've got to work together and perform at a reasonably high level. Talent development is something that happens in collaborations. You might not necessarily think that, hey, if I'm leading a collaboration or have a major role in it, the people that are working with me or for me for purposes of this collaboration, I'm going to develop them. But in reality, we collaborate so often and on projects in organizations today. It's important that we think about as leaders, how do we ensure people are building skills during the duration that we're working with them? Oftentimes, your collaboration is well outside your function. And typically, we want to associate our collaboration with very clear goals and outcomes. So the definition we're drawing on is actually from Morten Hansen and Ermina Ibarra, faculty, I think at Berkeley. And I'm not sure where Ermina is. I think she was at SA. The collaborative leadership, it's the capacity to engage people and groups outside of one's formal control and really inspire them to work toward these common goals. You'll hear that come up frequently, despite the fact that people are bringing significant differences to the table, where they work, what their convictions or values or their beliefs or operating norms are. And that's what, it's almost like the wider you go with the collaboration, the more diverse a pool of people you get. Now, that's beneficial in terms of potentially generating creative outcomes, but that requires for us as collaborative leaders more discipline in management. And it's not exactly the same kind of management that we might think of typically when it comes to project management. So the challenge, I would say, that faces organizations and you all today, and I'd be willing to bet some of you are on more than one major collaboration within or across your enterprise. And to Rob Cross's point, he's at Babson College, collaboration has become ubiquitous. We find ourselves getting involved in collaborations without asking the kinds of questions of, okay, what are the goals going to be? What will my contribution be? Am I the right person? What skills do we need for this? So in some cases, we set up collaborations that we don't necessarily need. In other cases, we short shrift or shortchange the collaborations we have in process. So I would say at the outset, before you engage in a collaboration, I remember from my days working in the federal government a long time ago as an advisor, I worked for a large law enforcement agency as a consultant. And whenever a problem came up, the leaders would say, the first thing we do is put a team together to work on it. And they started to wonder, is that really the first thing we should do, is put together a team to work on it? Because we commit a lot of time and resources, and it's not always clear that the team has a clear mandate and has that outcome that they're going to get to, or in fact, we need a team at all. So we want to be circumspect and thoughtful about whether or not we need to set up a large collaboration to begin with. So let's think about that. So I'm going to give you another quick thought exercise. We like to work with people who are good at collaborating. Well, think about a large project that you've ever worked on, and think about that project leader. What was it that he or she did that made them a great, we'll say, collaboration leader? So it's certainly there's an element of project management embedded in it, but even broader than that, it may extend beyond the boundaries of your organization. So think about that person if you work with them in your current role or previously, and go ahead and put in the chat, what is it, give me one attribute from your standpoint that you thought really contributed to making them a strong collaborative leader? Transparency, I like that. Good listener. A lot of empathy. They're engaging. They've got this confidence in their expertise. They're inclusive as a leader. They want to hear different people's opinions, and they're effective at communicating. But remember, communicating also includes listening, asking questions. It definitely helps to be organized, Richard. I would agree. An element of confidence, trustworthiness, non-judgmental. So they know that's a great point, Sarah. They're bringing the right people in, and they're attuned to the fact that we need to be operating with people with the right skills at the right level. Certainly, March, they drive to the outcomes and the deadlines. So you're seeing some common things, and one of the reasons I love to do this is not just to get you engaged and get your perspective, but everybody can sort of see flowing through the chat. Communication skills are important. Being a good listener, making sure you're giving clear guidance, making sure everybody's getting a voice in the room. It does help to be organized and somewhat process oriented, right? It is a project at the end of the day. Having some emotional intelligence or EQ, leading with a sense of transparency for the things that you do well or the things that are challenging. And I promise you, I don't know about multitasking. I think that sometimes I'm always a little suspicious. If you can do it, great, but not everyone is great at multitasking. But clearly, there are a lot of tasks to do and manage on a large collaboration. So collaborations in large projects tend to run into obstacles all the time. That's a commonplace. I don't know of anybody that's ever worked on a project that's gone perfectly smoothly from the outset. So the reality is we have to be able to work through as project leaders and collaborative leaders the challenges we have. So all the skills that we talked about here are essential. Yeah, and getting to know your team and working at a high level. So that's a nice segue, Roberto, into this very simple model we have. And I think you look at it and say, wow, this is pretty underwhelming. We came here for this. But again, it's back to the basics. It's like doing something like Alice and I were talking about, some examples, being a more effective leader or getting in shape. Most people know some of the principles and practices. In fact, many of them, we just don't always do them. That's the hard part. So first in the collaboration is you got to get the right people into the tent, so to speak. You want to have a diverse group of people who are creative minded, but also process focused, that are willing to step up and sort of challenge the status quo. So we've got to get the right people at the table, so to speak, or in the tent. But then as a collaborative leader, we've got to have a process, whether that's governance or it's linked to our project management activities. We've got to have a set of structures, guidelines, team norms, values, outcomes, et cetera, and engage in a set of ongoing activities that guide the collaboration toward success, and also work to effectively diffuse any conflict that we will inevitably have. It's going to happen. We just need to, as project leaders and collaborative leaders, manage it effectively. Because again, we've got all these different people at the table. And then we can never lose sight of performance, right? What is it that we're trying to accomplish as outcomes here? And oddly enough, when I asked this question at my large transportation provider in the Midwest a couple of weeks ago, one of the people said, I've been working on this cabinet that I go to quarterly. People don't do the work. We're not sure what we're doing. We just sort of show up and we have this conversation. I bet some of you have been on something like that. I'd be willing to bet that's at some point in your career, you're on a team. You're like, what are we doing? Where are we going? What is the outcome? That's the kind of process deficiencies that will not enable you to reach the performance targets that you have. But you as a project leader or as a collaborative leader need to make sure that you've got clarity around what your outcomes are, what your goals are, make sure everyone is participating and understands what success looks like. So as simple as that sounds, and it is simple, doing it in practice is a lot more difficult. So let's talk about the particulars. So the first thing you want to do, I would say, is almost around having the right mindset when it comes to people. And that's why we ask that question around, what are the skills and behaviors that a leader who is a good collaborator demonstrates? You have to think now in your role how to be an effective collaborative leader yourself. So you've got to model those behaviors. So you want to take the time to build strong relationships. We've talked about that in another session, both inside and outside your organization, with your supplier base, with your customers or your clients, with any other element or stakeholder that's important. One of the things I find that starts to separate leaders as they become more senior to sort of leaders that are not necessarily getting advanced, and that was the whole premise behind 12 Skills, was to help people advance, is that they're much more proactive with managing their relationships and their network, both inside and outside their organization, not in terms of volume, and Rob Frost would say this, in terms of having the right people in your network for what you're trying to accomplish. In conjunction with that, you need to demonstrate that you are a team player. You can work on a team. You can take guidance and direction if you're in a follower role, or you can step up if you're in a leadership role. But in either case, it's essential that you demonstrate the kind of behaviors that convince people, hey, you're a team player. And you've got to commit yourself to being someone who, again, knows how to develop talent, because so much happens on your projects, whether they be small or large scale. You have to be the kind of person that we like to say is a talent magnet. Hey, if I work for Emerald, I know that my skills and capabilities are going to get built. And that's the kind of people, the kind of leaders we need more of in organizations today. So in addition to demonstrating the right collaborative mindset and behaviors yourself, you've got to get the right people on the team. And you've got to have the right direction, right? So if it's entirely top down in terms of driving the collaborative effort, that's going to be too overbearing. It won't allow people to have the kind of input opportunities that they really joined for, ideally. But consensus on the other side is too slow. Trying to get a large group of people to all agree on something, as someone said to me years ago, you end up, if you're not careful, getting to the lowest common denominator. So neither of these really work. Collaborative leaders, in addition to identifying the right people, have to set up the structures and have the right type of leadership approach that demonstrates they can have authority, but share that with other people on the collaboration. So it truly is a participant-oriented process, but at some point in time, an effective leader, she has to be able to push the team along to get to the outcomes. And the way you do that is by always going back to measuring performance against the goals that you have. At any point in time, you should be clear on what the goals are. They should be broadly understood. They should be broken down into component parts that are measurable, and they should be getting gauged regularly, whether that's weekly or monthly or whatever the right frequency is, to determine whether or not you're achieving those goals. So not only having the right people, but driving the process is essential. But then you've got to have people on your team and in the collaboration that are good at collaborating. So you start with modeling the behaviors, but you want to try to bring people in who have that rare mix of both process focus and creativity. And that can sometimes be a challenge to identify those people. But you want people who are sort of forward thinking. They're good at identifying and scoping opportunities and then coming up with creative solutions. Doesn't mean you can do them all or that they'll all rise to the top on your team, but people that are thinking about new ways and creative ideas that can solve the challenges that the collaborative team is working on. You've got to have people that are open-minded and willing to share and listen to people who have very different views from their own. And some people are challenged by that. So as a collaborative leader, you want to not only select people that are open-minded and are willing to share and listen, but are effective working in that environment with people who have quite a bit of diversity. Certainly, and you can see it from the chat, you've got to have team players that are able to shift and change. There's research out there that shows that in the middle of a project, and actually I would say this actually transcends projects into one's life even, there is a punctuation that occurs almost invariably at halfway through. So a project team may be working along for a period of time, and usually at what would be considered to be the midpoint of the duration of that project, there'll be kind of a jolt and a recalibration of what it is we want to achieve. For individuals, we term that the midlife crisis. That's an actual, it's sort of a colloquialism. But oftentimes people, when they hit that sort of 40-ish age mark, start sort of having this internal biological clock that says, hey, I'm about halfway done with this life thing. If the standard convention of survivorship comes to pass, am I doing the things that I want to be doing? And the same is true on a more micro level on projects. But you want to have people that can work together to build agreement and contribute to the team. And you want to have people who bring different views to the table and are open to developing their networks and their reach. So it should be a great opportunity for you as a collaborative leader, or even if you're just a colleague on a collaboration, to see this as a truly mind-opening and engaging experience rather than the drudgery of project work, which sometimes anything with a deliverable can be. So let me ask you this. One of the things that's essential to building the kind of team that we're talking about with your own behavior, with the right skills, the right people at the table, is building trust. And I don't think I've talked about this previously, but I'm going to throw it out to you, see if you're still paying attention as we get to a little bit past the halfway point. What is required to build trust between people and on teams? What is it that the leader or any colleague has to do to build trust? There's an actual equation. Some of you may have heard of it. I'll show you, but put it in the chat what you think is required to build trust. Accountability, some experience, integrity, accountability. Yeah, honesty, vulnerability. Thanks, Christine. Reliability, privacy. You can't, sir. You got to build trust. Thanks, Daniel. I think, yeah, you can't mandate it. Good. Back to this listening skill, dependability. That's an important one, Carol, and you'll see we'll come back here. Honesty, integrity, those kinds of things. These are all on track. Now, yep, knowledge, relationships, consistency. Consistency is a good one. Thanks, Ariel. So I don't know. Some of you may have heard of this thing called the trust equation, and I'm going to show it to you now. And it's a way to quantify trust. And it might seem a little almost hokey, but if you think about it, it's actually quite effective. So in this particular equation, and this was developed about 20 years ago by, you'll see Andrea Howe and Charlie Green, actually some other consultants as well. But what they discovered, and it was primarily through their work in professional services, because that, and most of the work we do today is knowledge-based or relationship-based work. That trust is a function of 4 variables, and there's 3 in the numerator, 1 in the denominator. So the first one is credibility. So the large T is your trustworthiness. So as an individual, we're looking at trustworthiness as a noun. It's the ability, the sense that the sort of interior ability to be trusted by other people. So your trustworthiness, and think about this for yourself, and then you can also think about it for people you've worked with, is a function of your credibility. Okay, are you the kind of person that knows your job? You understand what's happening on the project or the collaboration. And someone said this about accountability and commitments. The next one is reliability. Do you deliver what you say you're going to deliver when you say you're going to deliver it? And intimacy. Do people feel like they know you? And this goes back to some of the points around transparency at a more personal level, not every intimate detail about you, obviously, but they feel like they know you beyond just your kind of work persona. So those variables are aggregated, and it's divided by self-orientation, which is how much you focus on you versus the team. And the way to improve your trust quotient, if you will, is to enhance or increase the variables on the numerator and decrease the self-orientation on the denominator. And I'll give you a little illustration. So the levers that you have that you can influence are, is be somewhat open and transparent with people, and, let people get to know you, and reciprocally get to know people you work with. And then sort of focus a little less on yourself. So has anyone ever worked for, I would say most of you, the answer is going to be yes. Has anyone ever worked for a manager, don't put any names in the chat, who you thought, boy, this person is primarily focused on their own interests? This guy or this woman is really out for themselves. I think most of us have had that experience. So the real question isn't whether or not we've had that experience, because a lot of us have. My question to you is, how does that make you feel when you work with someone who has a high self-orientation? What do you feel like? What do you experience? What is it like to work with somebody who has a high you're dispensable, right? I don't care what happens to you. You can feel on edge. It's frustrating. Well, how come it's frustrating? That's a good one, Monica. Monique, sorry. You feel like you're getting taken advantage of. I like to call it, there's this instrumental view of you. It's like, I don't really care about you. I'm just using you to get something done. And that's why we betrayed. Wow, that's a strong one. But I'm not questioning any of the things that you had as lived experiences here. So a means to an end, and it's not getting any better on the chat, sorry, but I should have struck a chord here. But the point is, we want to ensure that as leaders, We have the appropriate level of self-focus relative to our team. And that's why I draw us back to this important concept of developing talent. You want to make sure that you're participating in making people feel like, I'm not just using you to get this project done. I want you to get something out of this. Yeah, it's somewhat hopeless. I mean, these aren't great feelings to have at work, and they're very frustrating for people. So the trust equation is a great way to kind of think about how can I become more trustworthy, and also to evaluate other people. And we teach this a lot in the classes that I talk about because I think it's so important. So once you've sort of identified, managed, put together your team, and you've got some type of awareness and cadence going, you want to move into the right process. So none of this should be surprising. Use a charter. We've talked about that previously, but everyone should participate in defining a shared purpose. What is it that we're going to do, and what is it we're going to achieve here? What's the purpose of this? If you can't define that, you've got a problem, right? So you should be able to define the purpose of the collaboration team. You want to ensure that people feel like, and this flies in the face of what everyone was just putting in the chat, you want to feel like people are going to make a contribution that's meaningful. And you want to set the stage and the foundation that we put here, an ethic of contribution, that everybody here is going to get an opportunity to participate because, hey, we need the best thinking, and everybody needs to be thinking. We can't have any free riders here. You want to have processes and procedures that are scalable and flexible. As people come on the collaboration, go off the collaboration, you want to be able to manage it smoothly. It's very important. And you have to have some type of infrastructure, how you manage the work, how you allocate the work, how you integrate across different teams, different organizations, how you're going to operate when you're matrix, or how you're going to operate when you're virtual. I would bet dollars to donuts that if you just take the time to write these things down and agree with your team members, you will significantly enhance the effectiveness of the collaborations you work on. Because again, going back to what I said at the outset, we take collaborating for granted so frequently that we don't take the time to do the basics. So Sarah's question is something formalized like bylaws, or is it more informal? It's not quite as formalized as that. It's something that on the collaboration, which they're typically temporary organizations that are cross-functional. They're not standing organizations, but it's more along the lines of a team charter. Think of it like that. That's a good question. So when you're collaborating, you also have to think about, how do we collaborate virtually? What's the kind of technology that we're going to use? How do we ensure that it's universally understood by people, that it maximizes sharing and information exchange, that people feel safe in the environment that they're working in, that it's in the right languages, the right time zone? All these things are now major considerations in the post-pandemic world. We want to have people, again, be involved in what it is they're building and they're participating in. So one of the things I just love to see people put in the chat is, what are some of the virtual collaboration challenges that you've run across in the work that you've done, say, over the past year or two? What are some of the things that you find challenging virtually? I would say one of the things that I've heard is getting to know people. Yeah, sometimes, how many of you, honestly, John puts in a lack of genuine engagement. Some of you are listening, but you're doing some other things at the same time. I'd be willing to bet that. Staying on task. Communication's a real challenge. Yeah, you can have living in Hawaii. I thought that was a good thing. Yeah, there's oftentimes technical challenges. Yeah, if withholding information is oftentimes not very good. Poor Zoom manners. I won't even go into that, but people who behave certain ways on calls. It's wonderful that we have virtual collaboration today. Yeah, and it's very hard to read people. You don't have them in front of you. You don't get the same types of cues in 2 versus 3 dimensions. So as a leader, you have to be more tuned by and large than you might necessarily be in the physical world. Yeah, there's all kinds of challenges that we face. But a good collaboration is designed to account to the fullest extent where we're able to some of these challenges. So keep in mind, the virtual collaboration, I would argue, it's not like another thing. It's usually part of the collaborations that we're engaging in. And then you want to get to a place where the collaboration achieves high performance. But to do that, you have to think a little differently. You want to give people prompts and tools and the space to free their minds. Ask questions like, what if we relaxed all of our assumptions? Or what if the assumptions we're making about this particular goal or outcome are not right? What would change? If we looked at the problem from the inverse or the reverse, what might we think? If we tried to get outside the problem and see it, which is very important. If you were the CEO, what would you do? You may be at some point. So think about it now. What, the classic pros and cons, right? How many of you out there have made a decision? Should I move or should I take this job and divide the paper? Here's the pros, here are the cons. These are effective techniques that get us to think about things at a little more constructive level. Hey, look, we're just going to take a few minutes here and just kind of brainstorm, get some things out on the table. Typically, the research shows that brainstorming is more effective when people prepare a little bit in advance. And let people know that, hey, this is an ideation activity. So we're not criticizing ideas. We're just trying to get things out on the table because sometimes those ideas roll into other ideas. So the things that come up initially may not be right on track, but we can oftentimes evolve those few steps into something that might be a little more effective. Can you mind map? Can you depict? Can you share some of the ideas in a way that helps people draw the connections? So it's essential that we think about when we're collaborating, not just hitting the targets on the work. That's important. I don't want to minimize that, but doing so in a way that enables people to think, not just collaboratively, but creatively. And then ultimately, we have to evaluate performance. Okay, we've got to make sure that the goals that we specified are the right goals. They're going to meet the stakeholders' needs in on behalf of the organization in a way that we can gauge whether or not we're making progress. If you're on a team, on a project team or a collaborative team that's broader than just your sort of in-house project team, and you're not clear on whether or not you're achieving your goals, you probably want to go back and start asking some questions about, hey, how are we going to measure success? Because that's important. So leaders have to manage this balance between the short term and the long term, the right mix of sort of process or input activities, and then outcome metrics, and look at the performance of individuals as well as the team as a whole. So there's quite a bit going on. Now, if you use a performance scorecard or something like that with targets and things like that, which is beyond the scope of what we're going to talk about today. But we can put an example in at some point if you want that. But ultimately, the whole idea is that you are thinking about, are we in fact making progress toward our goals? Now, why don't these collaborations work? Why do we run into barriers? Well, as we see from the outset, it's important to get the right people on the team. If you don't get the right skills, and I would say also at the right level on the team who can actually take the discussions and the decisions back to their organizations and act on them. If we don't get the right people on the team, it's going to be hard to be effective. So we want to do some extra thinking around who we really need to fulfill which roles from which parts of the organization, and ask, do they have the ability to make the time commitment? If they can't make the time commitment, is there someone else that might be able to be there instead? And the same thing is true of you. And this is not necessarily related to the wrong people on the team, but if somebody is asking you to be on a collaboration or project team, you really should take the time to ask a few questions before you say yes. Many of us at work have the inclination, oh, absolutely, I want to do that. It's useful to say, it sounds interesting, but I just have a few questions. What's the time commitment? Okay, who's going to be involved? Is it clear what the mandate is for this team? The purpose, who's the executive sponsor? How long will it last? What does success look like? Some of those questions are important. I would say actually all of them are important, but we oftentimes don't ask those up front, and I think to our own detriment. And we want to avoid getting engaged in collaborations that are sort of what I would call the zombie collaboration. They just kind of keep meeting and meeting and meeting, but nothing's really happening, back to the example I gave at the outset. Leaders have a responsibility, and colleagues do as well, to create a safe environment where people feel like I can share information. There's transparency to the degree that it's allowed. I mean, sometimes you can't share everything when you're working on stuff. But the idea is that people feel like I can bring myself, my ideas, my creativity to this team, and I'm not going to be criticized for it. The last thing you want to have is the third point, negative incentives that punish people or gives people short shrift in any way, shape, or form. You want to make sure that we create this environment and any incentives that we have that bring out the best in people, both on the creativity side and the performance side. And now, again, not every group that comes together needs to get transitioned into this high performing team. Sometimes it's okay to come together as a working group. Nothing wrong with that. But again, I want you to be thinking about, does it make sense to put together a large working group? Think about if you really need a large collaborative effort. But if you do think you need one, then make sure you bring the right people to the table who can help in that regard. That's essential. Because if you don't, you'll be fumbling through the collaboration, trying to get the work done. People will be onboarding and offboarding the team. And some of you know what this is like. And it really impairs the ability to make progress. So make sure you get the right people on the team at the right level. You create the right environment with the right process. If you do have incentives in place, make those clearly linked to performance outcomes and behaviors in some cases. And then make sure that if you are going to collaborate in a sort of bona fide way, you make sure, in fact, that you need a collaboration to do that. Because to set one up when you don't is to invite failure. So just to kind of wrap things up, and we'll bring Allison back here in a minute. What I want you to think about is setting the example. Be the kind of leader or the kind of team member that demonstrates the skills that many of you put in the chat. Be a good listener, be empathetic, be transparent, hit your deliverables, be accountable, be a team player, be empathetic, etc. Make sure that you get the right people, quote unquote, on the bus. Jim Collins is saying, you've got diversity, you've got creativity, you've got drive. Your progress is going to really depend on your ability to get the right people at the table. But getting the right people at the table is not sufficient. You need a process. And if you don't have a good process, put one in place. Start with a team charter, clarify meeting frequency, purpose, deliverables, all those things that we need. And once you get the process in place, manage the process, right? Don't just assume that process will happen on its own. It won't. And make sure you include aspects of how you'll manage things like virtual teams, how you'll handle onboarding and offboarding during the project if it's long term. And then think about outcomes. What are the metrics or the measures or the KPIs? I don't care what you call it, but the thing I like to say is, how will you gauge success? How will you know you're making progress? What does a successful outcome look like in an interim way and in sort of the ultimate way when the collaboration is heading towards the final stages? How will you gauge whether or not you've been effective, not just in terms of your team and your leadership of the team, but getting to the place that you wanted to get to meet the overall purpose of the collaborative effort? So think about these things. Now, again, I want to be clear, none of this stuff should be a surprise to anybody. The challenge is for us to do it well. And that's what I want you to encourage you to do, is really think about, even if you're not leading a collaboration, if you're on a team, you can have the kinds of conversations and questions that elevate everybody's performance. So it's important to be engaging with those. Make a subtle change. Ask, if there's no team charter, say, or project charter, collaborative charter, hey, can I put one together and just share it with people? You'll be recognized as someone who is, in fact, a collaborative leader, which is our goal for you, is to be in that position where you're recognized as somebody that can not only work with other people, you're the kind of person that can get things done in organizations. So with that, I'm going to ask my esteemed colleague, Allison, to come on back up, and we'll spend some time answering questions that people have.
Thank you so much, Ed. This was incredible as always. I learned something new from you every time. And so I have some questions for all of you. And so
Nice.
I'm going to issue a poll and get your feedback on what types of programs we should offer next. But I also want to put out the call that if you do have a question, please submit it now so that when the polls are over, we can get through as many as possible. Click on the bottom bar of Zoom, click on Q&A, and type and submit your questions there. And in the meantime, I'm going to launch this poll. So we are growing as a department very, very quickly. And as a result, we want to make sure that the programs we are launching are programs that serve you and serve your needs. And we ensure that we are on target by asking you questions like this in these types of settings. So the first question that I have for you is, which of the following programs, all of which would be 6-week courses, $2.5 thousand for tuition, primarily asynchronous, would you be most likely to enroll in at Brown? And you can click all that applies. The choices are advanced diversity, equity, and inclusion, change management, conflict resolution, data analysis and visualization, an emerging leaders program, executive presence, financial management, leading an intergenerational workplace, managerial economics, strategic management, women's leadership, or none of the above. The second question I have for you, the remaining 3 questions are actually all about AI. And the second one is, which skills do you most want to learn through an AI course? And the skills are building AI literacy and acceptance in my workplace, so being a leader and leading that transition, governing AI usage effectively, incorporating AI into my business strategy, measuring the performance of AI in my business, using AI ethically, or none of the above, not interested in an AI course. The third question is, how likely are you to enroll in a 6-week, 2.5K, mostly asynchronous course on AI business transformations? This means the strategy, the measurement. And this goes from extremely likely to extremely unlikely. And the fourth and final question is, how likely are you to enroll in a 6-week, 2.5K asynchronous course on effective and ethical AI, how to integrate technology and people strategies together, from extremely likely to extremely unlikely? So I'll leave this poll open so you can continue to answer. And thank you so much for answering it. And in the meantime, we'll jump over to your questions. And so the first question, Ed, is how do you manage collaboration effectively when some assigned team members lack crucial competencies and skills?
Yes, that's a very good question. I'm sure that comes up very frequently. So I think this goes back to two things. I mean, you want to try to avoid this challenge if you can by identifying the kinds of skills and capabilities you'll need up front. So that would be the best way. But despite the fact that we do that or we try to do that, we oftentimes end up with people on the collaboration that may not have the skills. So the question you have to ask is, can I develop or can we develop the skills for this person, sort of in process, or do we really need to, shore that up by getting another person on the team, which requires a bit of diplomacy. Sometimes in organizations, people will ask someone to join a collaboration that they may not be the stellar performer, if you know what I mean. So we have an obligation to figure out how to either work with what we have, distribute the work differently, have someone else shore up some of that stuff, or go back and make a request potentially for the person that truly has the kinds of skills we need on the collaboration and doing that in a way that's not in any way, shape, or form disruptive to the person that is on the collaboration, because we don't want them to ever feel like they're not a valuable part of the team. But sometimes we just need a different skill set, that's all. Good question.
Well, thank you. Do you have any tips and tricks for course correcting a team that already exists, but it's not efficient?
Yeah. Well, it depends to some degree on what you mean when you say they're not efficient. Are they moving slowly? Are they not getting work done on time? Are they doing it wrong? I mean, we'd have to unpack that a little bit. But if you go back to the model, right, people, process, performance, I think you can kind of work backwards. So if you've got a project timeline, whether it's a Gantt chart or whatever, and you've got performance metrics, you can use those as a means to ask, is to sort of emphasize with people, here's where we need to be. If we're not hitting those things, what do we think is causing that? What can we do as a team to enable us to sort of accelerate our performance, or to the question that was asked, work a little more efficiently? So if you start with, measuring the outcomes, the goals and the metrics, and then go back and potentially refine the process, and then go back again and potentially make some alterations with the staffing, that's the way I would probably approach it. There's other ways to approach it, but relative to that question, I might think of just checking, what gets measured gets done. So check that regularly. And if you're having trouble getting things done, then check more often.
That's a great answer and a great segue into the next question.
Good.
Is about metrics. So they said the performance metrics will likely vary depending on the type of collaboration, but can you share some examples of metrics to set out?
Yeah, I mean, I could never give a standard set of just use these metrics. So there's going to be at least 2, I would say. And in the model that we actually, Allison, you'll appreciate this from the conversation we had like 2 weeks ago. In the model that we use in the course on execution, we measure 2 things. One is we measure the project performance, like, and that's milestones. Are we on cost? Are we progressing the way we intended the project or the collaboration to progress? The other way is with the objective or the goal outcomes. Where are we trying to get to a certain outcome, such as the redesign of a process or the creation of a new product, that we can have some type of metrics associated with that. So if you think in these two dimensions, one is going to be really related to, is the project moving forward along the project timelines? And then similarly, are we getting the outcomes or the outcome type of measures that are letting us know that we're making progress toward our overarching goal or purpose? So they're different things, and I think sometimes we conflate them. I mean, I think it's useful to separate the world, so to speak, to see if we're on track, sort of cost, performance, schedule, the standard, the triangle of the project management world, and then the specific deliverables that link to the goals or objectives for that project's purpose and outcomes. Hopefully that helps give you some insights on that.
Absolutely. That's great.
Elson, you could answer that question from our last conversation.
I do feel like I've learned a lot about the 12 skills model by working on these projects together, but could never reach your level of expertise, of course. The next question is, can you speak on how to navigate interpersonal friction among equals when there's no defined leader to a high-performing team?
Well, there's a couple of challenges in that question. It's the no defined leader and the interpersonal friction. So I would say, and what we talked about today, leveraging the trust equation, using our listening skills, seek first to understand and then be understood, try to do some good diagnosis in what's causing the friction, and try to address that. It's easy for me to say here, I'm not dealing with that, but usually, using your mouth and ears in the proportion that they were given to you is a good start to make sure we understand what's happening. And then the leader bit is oftentimes a challenge. Sometimes we don't have clear leadership. Sometimes the leadership is, I should say, not as directive as it could be. Other times people step in and start to assume leadership roles. I'm going to try to go back to the diagnostics we talked about here. Try to use the process tools. So if the leadership isn't clear, that might mean that the roles aren't clear. So set up a team charter that defines roles and defines what's expected for that role. So I think it's possible, I don't know the particulars, it's possible that if the collaboration or the project isn't set up clearly from the start, you run into these issues. Who's the leader? What is she responsible for? Who's responsible for this decision? Who can make this? Who can swap out somebody? All those things need to go into some type of project charter or operating agreement. Otherwise, you end up with a lack of clarity around roles and responsibilities, which can, in some cases, lead to some confusion around what she or he should be doing.
Thank you. And we unfortunately only have time for one more question, which is
okay.
so crushing. I know we have such great questions in here.
You do.
So thank you all for your thoughtful questions. So the last question I'll ask is, how do you balance results and process? Because some of the steps you've described take time. And so how do you balance, needing to get to a deliverable or a result with the effectiveness of the team?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I wish I could just give you an answer 2-to-1, that would be lovely. The balance comes from the seasoned project/collaboration leader. Typically, you would have a project plan. Typically, you'd have certain milestones and goals that you want to achieve. But I think it's this kind of iterative process. But one of the things I think can be really useful is a strong governance calendar, meaning, we're going to talk about results every month on this day. We're going to, have our process check-ins these times per week. I think clarity around how you're going to execute the project or the collaboration, and clarity around visibility of the results and when they're supposed to be, I'll say, achieved, and then toggling back and forth. If you're not getting the results, you might want to be a little more structured or push a little harder with the process, but you have to sort of negotiate that too. So it's definitely a feel. It's something that you have to kind of get a sense for, and what the team can tolerate given the level of effort that the project requires.
Thank you. That's a great answer. Thank you all so much for being
here. Yeah, thanks for being here, everybody.
Thank you for your participation, your amazing questions, and for helping to shape the future of the School of Professional Studies through the polls. We hope to
appreciate
see you in future lessons in leadership and also in future classes. And thank you, Ed, as always. I
My
always learn
pleasure.
so much, and the time always flies by. So thank you
Same
all so
here.
much. Have a great rest of your day.
All right, take care, everybody.
Bye.